Social studies, we are going to start off by comparing two different communities. What do you see here? There are two pictures displayed on the screen of two different types of communities. Up on top, you can see the type of community that we talked about yesterday, which is an urban community. And from what you remember, an urban community is what most big cities are. Cities are urban communities. And you probably remember that cities have lots of buildings and people. People do a lot of walking, or they take buses or taxis or trains to get around. And there's a lot of noise, but there's lots of stuff to do in cities. There's tons of museums and parks. But down below, you can see a community that looks a lot different than an urban community. What kind of community is pictured on top? That's an urban community. And how are the buildings in each community different? You can see that down here, you've probably seen these types of buildings before. Maybe you've passed them by in the country. Those look like barns. Those look like farms. And there aren't very many buildings. Which community is less crowded? You can see down here, lots of land, lots of farmland, not many buildings. If there's not many buildings or houses, there probably aren't very many people, so it's probably not very crowded down here. Which has more traffic? I don't even see many roads down here. Which community has more land? If you've ever ridden in an airplane before and you've looked down, it sort of looked like this, didn't it? It was easy to tell the farmland and the grasslands, all the browns and greens. You probably aren't going to find many farms in an urban community, but down here, in the community that we're going to talk about, you are going to find farms, because farms need lots of space. Which has fewer stores? And where would you see more animals? Now these two pictures are very similar. You are looking at examples of rural communities. Small towns are rural communities. What is found in a rural community? Small towns are in the countryside. They are far from cities. Small towns have fewer people than cities. Many people know their neighbors well in a small town. Small towns might have just one store. There may be a post office, a bank, and a school. Do you live in a small town? Mrs. Simmons lives in a very small town, just like what they described and very much like what you see here in these pictures. Lots of farmland. We do have a post office. We do have one small store. But we have mostly farmland. What is it like living in a rural community? Many people live and work on farms in rural communities. They drive to the store and the post office. Students ride a bus to school. This is different than an urban community where students might be able to walk to their school. There are different ways to have fun in a small town. In a city, you might visit a big aquarium. In a small town, You might go fishing. What things would you like to do in a small town? What are the advantages of a rural community? What are the disadvantages? Some people might like living far from a city. Some people might not like living so far from a city. Some people might have different opinions on advantages and disadvantages of big urban cities and rural communities.